This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, world share markets slipped for a third straight day as China cracked down again on its big tech firms. MSCI's emerging market equity index lost 1% to hit its lowest level since the end of August, with Hong Kong stocks marking their worst day in 6 weeks as we saw those tech shares tumbling today. In South Africa, the JSE tumbled over 2%, with Naspers dragging the bourse lower. The stock was down almost 8% after Chinese officials told Tencent and other gaming companies to end their focus on profit in gaming. Now, also coming up on today's show, we bring you one of the leading voices of a greener agricultural revolution in Africa. Trade and the global fight against COVID-19 topped the agenda at this year's BRICS summit. And Ugandans go cashless as one of the ways to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Now, the 13th BRICS summit opened on Thursday, bringing together the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The meeting is being held online for the second time because of the pandemic. Trade and the global fight against COVID-19 are some of the items being discussed. Chinese President Xi Jinping said China will donate another 100 million doses of vaccines to developing nations within this year. He also added that the bloc has become an important force on the global stage and it will continue to make progress as long as the 5 countries act together.
Next year, China will take over as the chairman of BRICS, and we will host the 14th BRICS Summit. We look forward to working with our BRICS partners to deepen all areas of our cooperation and build a closer and more results-oriented partnership to meet our common challenges and create a better future.
Meanwhile, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is urging nations to ensure that they have equal access to COVID-19 vaccines, as well as diagnostics and therapeutics. Ramaphosa says this is the only way in which nations can respond to COVID-19 effectively.
All tracks of our BRICS cooperation have been oriented towards concrete responses to the pandemic. As the BRICS countries, we must continue to safeguard our people's lives and livelihoods. We must continue to support global economic recovery and enhance the resilience of all our public systems. We must also ensure equal access to COVID-19 vaccines.
Well, let's move on now. President Uhuru Kenyatta has rallied African nations to accelerate their efforts aimed at attaining greater food security on the continent. Now, the president says Kenya is committed to transforming its food systems by re-engineering the country's agriculture to leverage more on its large and vibrant youth population. He called on African leaders to prioritize initiatives that will cause inclusive agricultural transformation. Well, joining us now to give us her insights into Africa's agriculture sector is Dr. Agnes Kalibata. She's the president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Great to have you on the show with us today, Doctor. Now, certainly this year's status report from AGRA highlighted the fact that the region has made some impressive progress since 2000 when it comes to the agricultural sector. But of course, African food systems still remain pretty fragile. So give us a sense of why we need to change our food systems approach in Africa if we want to end hunger.
Thank you for having me. So one reason why we would change our food system definitely is the fact that the current food systems are not delivering an end to hunger. That's number one. Number two, we still have huge burdens of health coming from malnutrition, but now also from obesity, which if we invested right in food systems, if we invested in the right food, we wouldn't do. Number three, our food system is now, our food is, the way we produce food is actually impacting the environment. So there's the whole idea of the true cost of food to our health, to our environment, but also to entrenching poverty is something we need to deal with. And if the current food system is not delivering it, then we must change our food systems. That's really the idea behind changing our food system.
Now, of course, we can't ignore the fact that COVID-19, that added another complex layer to other food security threats that Africa is facing, such as climate change and, of course, economic slowdowns and downturns. How much of a setback and an opportunity has this pandemic been? And what are some of the key pathways to agricultural recovery post-pandemic?
So a setback, this pandemic has been huge to the economy of most nations, nearly all nations around the world, but a lot to African nations. In terms of the opportunity, I think it has created a sense of urgency across the world, helping people recognize that irrespective of where in the world, we have weaknesses in our systems, in our food systems. There are so many vulnerable people that are only one small shock away from the wrong meal or absence of a meal completely. So the pandemic has woken us to the fact that we need to double down and start investing in our food systems. And in terms of pathways, there are a few things that we definitely must do. Ensuring that we are increasing productivity on this continent using technologies, good seed, good use of fertilizers so that farmers can increase productivity, ensuring that farmers have access to finance, but also taking advantage of technology, of the digital technology to reach farmers with or without COVID. We now have an opportunity to reach so many more farmers using the telephone, using digital systems that are now available to be able to take them services they would usually would not have had. So there are a number of pathways, but I think the most critical is that we take advantage of the technological opportunities that sit amidst us to build resilience, to ensure we are building resilience to climate change, but also to things like COVID-19.
And certainly at this year's AGRA summit, there were a lot of new approaches discussed, including an African approach. So tell us why the AGRF 2021 summit is critical for Africa's agriculture going forward.
So AGRF is always critical to Africa's agriculture because we use it as an opportunity to bring policymakers. Yesterday we had about 8 heads of state. We use it to bring private sector to talk about the intersection between policy, investments, and really action so that we can be able to deliver. This year, what makes a difference this year is that we are now looking at food from not an ending hunger perspective only, but we are looking at it from the nexus, the opportunity of being at crossroads. We are at crossroads from an environment perspective. We are at crossroads from a health perspective. This is a one in a lifetime opportunity for Africa to think about how it wants to really build its food system. And it's 2 weeks away from the Food System Summit. So we wanted to come together as Africa and think through some of the things that we think are most critical and most important for our continent that is part of showing up in the next 2 weeks in New York. So yes, it was an opportunity to really rally our effort, but also ensure that every African business politician understands the value and the essence of transforming our food system.
Quite right. Well, many thanks, Doctor, for joining us on the show today and for those great insights. That, of course, is Dr. Agnes Kalibata. She is the president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Well, staying in the sector, the South African agricultural sector has had a good production and harvesting season. August tractor sales of 724 units were almost 56% more than the 465 units sold in August last year. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on that story.
Not only are tractor sales up, 14 combine harvesters were sold in August. And on a year-to-date basis, combine harvester sales are now 25% up on last year. And that's due to the good crop yields.
South Africa is having one of the fantastic seasons in 2020-21 production season. Because now, I mean, that's like the second largest on record, around about just over 16 million tons.
Farmers in the summer cropping areas have just had a good harvesting season, had a good production season. It's not quite a record maize crop, but it's one of the highest maize crops ever. The soybean crop, which is the second biggest crop, is the highest crop ever. And overall, commodity prices have been good. So the farmers' net income has been good.
That net income growth has led to many farmers replacing their machinery.
The tractor sales is one of the important indicators, have been growing by double digits in South Africa since about mid-2020 coming into this year.
It's important to have good equipment because a lot of the processes in agriculture are timeous. So they've taken the opportunity to replace equipment, not just tractors, but combine harvesters as well.
Tractors and combine harvesters make up 75% of the monetary value of the new agricultural machinery market, which is estimated at $715 million, and most of it is imported.
The prices have improved because of the stronger rand, but it's still a very, very competitive market. So everybody sharpens their pencils very, very carefully in accordance with what the rand value at which they brought in the machine was and is likely to be.
The agricultural sector had a good season. Confidence is high, harvests are up, commodity prices have improved, and exports are solid with a $1.5 million agricultural trade surplus. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And now let's take a look at some of today's corporate headlines. South African state-owned power utility Eskom says the $9.1 million spent on performance bonuses at the company was self-funded. Now, Eskom spokesperson adds that the bonuses were only paid to employees and not to management. And a revival plan for Kenya Airways is awaiting approval by the Treasury amid hopes for improved fortunes in the medium term. Submitted by the UK consulting firm Steer Group, the plan proposes the most viable options of revamping the airline in the face of deepening financial losses and limited passenger numbers. And British airline EasyJet has rejected a takeover approach from rival Wizz Air and is now launching a $1.7 billion fundraiser to see it through a slow recovery. EasyJet plans to use the cash to strengthen its balance sheet and to seize opportunities that arise from an expected recovery in air travel. The airline's shares dropped 10% in early trading following news of the rejected bid. And U.S. car giant Ford Motor Company is set to stop manufacturing cars in India and shut down both of its plants in the country. Now, the company says it had run up operating losses of more than $2 billion over the past decade in India, and demand for new vehicles had weakened. Ford is the latest big car firm to leave India in recent years. Back in 2017, General Motors stopped making cars for the Indian market. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come on the show. Africa's investment climate is still suffering from the effects of the pandemic, while business is booming at Tanzania's ports despite the COVID-19 disruptions.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this. rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, business at Tanzania's ports is booming despite the disruptions to trade brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. The increased revenues are as a result of improved infrastructure and performance at the Dar es Salaam and Mtwara ports. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more.
Tanzania's ports are performing well despite the COVID-19 pandemic. In the last 6 months, the country's ports handled 1 million more tons of cargo than it did in the same period last year, bringing in some $229 million. Eric Hamisi, the man tasked with overseeing Tanzania's ports, says not going into COVID lockdowns, improving infrastructure and overall efficiency is yielding double-digit growth in revenues.
If you look at July 2020, and July 2021, that is almost 23% increase of throughput. So we are doing well, and August this year is going to be even better.
Deepening of berths at the port of Dar es Salaam has enabled larger ships and volumes of cargo to come through. Players in the shipping industry say improvements at the port of Dar es Salaam have raised their business prospects.
We used to bring ships here and they wait 1 to 4 days out anchorage waiting for berth. Now, almost ship is coming and berthing directly on average. If there is a delay, it will be in hours, not in days like it was in the past.
Before the improvements, the World Bank estimated that shipping companies would lose around $252 million annually due to anchorage costs as a result of long delays. The bank believes that with improved efficiency, Tanzania's ports stand to contribute an additional 7% to the country's GDP.
The port of Dar es Salaam is currently the largest of several ports in Tanzania, handling 95% of the country's international trade. An increase in the volume of cargo that passes through here not only benefits the country's economy, but also the 8 landlocked countries served by it.
17 million tons of cargo passed through the port of Dar es Salaam last year, and only 5 million of them were transit cargo going to neighboring countries. Authorities say there is room for improvement.
We want to see the number going up, because that is, if you work out numbers, that is only 30% transit cargo. So this port is not for Dar es Salaam only, it's not for Tanzania only. This port is for the region.
The Tanzania Ports Authority says $100 million is being invested in new equipment to further improve the capacity of ports in the country. It hopes this will help the country become the #1 port in Africa within the next 10 years. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And moving on now, 2020 was quite a tough year for Africa's investment space. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, foreign direct investment flows into Africa declined by 16% in 2020, and that was due to the pandemic. Now, the challenging environment affected all aspects of foreign investment. Greenfield project announcements, which is a measure of investor sentiment and future FDI trends, dropped by 62%. Cross-border mergers and acquisitions fell by 45%, while international project finance announcements, especially relevant for large infrastructure projects, plummeted by 74%. Well, experts have been projecting a weak investment recovery this year. And as we enter the second half of the year, I asked Renaissance Capital's head of research, Yvonne Mango, how investors are reassessing Africa's investment prospects this year.
We have seen our fiscal balances deteriorate substantially, and we've seen debt levels spike. So you can imagine we're not as creditworthy as we were before the pandemic. So investors are having to be a lot more picky in terms of choosing investment destinations on the continent, but also African countries are having to seek more concessional financing in this environment. One of the positive developments in this regard has been the special drawing right allocations that were made at the end of last month by the IMF to all its members globally. But for Africa in particular, it meant $33 billion was actually allocated to the continent. So, for example, Kenya got $738 million, Nigeria $3.4 billion. And why that's positive is because it offers low financing at concessional terms, so it's not expensive financing, and it implies that African countries do not have to seek more expensive financing from capital markets.
Well, even as we're seeing investments and FDI flows starting to rebound, what are going to be the key drivers of a sustainable rebound in Africa's investment space, especially in terms of policy?
We need to stop seeing countries impose restrictions as they have COVID waves. So, for example, Kenya thus far has had 4 COVID waves. Nigeria has had 3, South Africa 3. But every time we see cases build up once again and we get towards our peak of our wave, we are seeing countries reimpose restrictions. And what that implies is you have this sort of stop-start recovery. So just as the economy starts to pick up once again, it is being closed down, or at least activity is being slowed down to try and minimize the infection rate domestically. Now, what will stop that type of reaction? And that's vaccination. That's why I guess the whole vaccination rollout is being pushed globally, because it does imply that we can get to a point whereby we won't have to reimpose restrictions. We can go on with our lives, even though infection rates go up. That linkage between hospitalization and deaths has been weakened, allowing for economies now to come back.
Well, looking forward, we know with COVID-19 has sort of come a huge shift towards the digital space here in Africa. So how vital of a role do you think technology and the digital economy will play in Africa's investment space going forward?
If you just look at the GDP growth numbers, the composition of growth during the pandemic, the fastest growing sector, at least in the economies that we cover, which is all of the bigger economies, was information and technology. And I think that demonstrates that there was a shift from transactions online, basically, whether it's businesses or households and schools. Everyone's shifted online. And certainly you saw that escalate the expansion of that sector. So that's been very interesting for me as an analyst to observe. We, as part of our conference, we had one of the panelists was the IMF's resident representative in Kenya, Tobias Muslim, and he was telling us about how mobile payments or transactions just surged through the pandemic. So I think it's been great. It's been great for inclusiveness. It's been great for allowing for access payment systems and to help facilitate transactions, particularly during a difficult time like the pandemic.
Now, globally, we are currently in a race to cut emissions and, of course, prepare for the effects of climate change. How much does investing in a low-carbon future feature in Africa's investment priorities?
I think we're seeing it pick up. An example I can give is Ghana, which is supposed to be issuing a green bond towards the end of the year. In South Africa, where I'm based, we're now seeing even the electricity utility company now talking about shifting towards green energy, retiring some of the coal-producing facilities. And I think part of the reason we're actually seeing that is because it's becoming a lot more easier to raise funding for green projects. So for a continent like ours, where there's always a deficit, well, we've got a huge infrastructure deficit, you find that governments are realizing that the one way to get more funding for electricity generation, for instance, to increase the amount of power we have, is to go the green route. It's much more easier to raise funding if you're going the green route. So I do believe it's picking up on the continent. We're starting to see a lot more examples of it taking place.
Yvonne Mango from Renaissance Capital there. Well, let's move on now. Plans are underway for Egypt to supply Lebanon with much needed natural gas that will be piped via Jordan and Syria to ease a crippling power crisis. Now, the plan is all part of a multi-nation effort to address Lebanon's power shortages, using Egyptian gas to be supplied via an Arab pipeline that was established some 20 years ago. Here's CGTN's Yasser Akim reporting.
Lebanon is living in the dark. The government is nearly bankrupt without enough foreign currency to buy fuel and natural gas to generate electricity, leaving vital sectors on the verge of collapse.
Today, we're having a double problem where it is the Lebanese authorities are not able to provide electricity. At the same time, the private generators are not able to provide electricity. So therefore, there are many hours where people are left without electricity at all. And therefore, this is having an impact on directly on the internet connection because it is cutting, and therefore people are being disconnected from the outside world. So we need like up to 4,000 megawatts today. At one point, they were generating like less than 1,000 megawatts, and this is why we were having these problems.
Lebanese officials are trying to find the least costly solution to this problem. Neighboring Iraq has committed 1 million tons of fuel oil for 1 year. And now Egypt, being self-sufficient in natural gas, is ready to export its surplus to the Asian nation.
The plan is to generate electricity in Jordan using Egypt's natural gas. This electricity will then be exported directly to Lebanon from Jordan through Syria. Also, Egypt will directly send natural gas to Lebanon through Jordan and Syria, which have agreed in the deal.
The Arab gas pipeline linking the three countries is already in place and can transport natural gas when needed. However, there is one main challenge.
The security situation in Syria is worrying. How can Syria protect the pipeline running from Jordan, and how can it protect a route to Lebanon? The problem is there can be some terrorist attacks from terrorist groups in the region. However, any damage to the pipeline can easily be fixed if there are technical teams in place with the relevant equipment. That's very important. If they're available, it will only take a few hours to fix the damage.
Once the plan is given the go-ahead, the agreement will go a far way into solving Lebanon's electricity shortage.
The plan is if the Iraqi fuel goes into several power plants, and the gas from Egypt to the Deir Ammar power plant, and then electricity directly through the grid to the Bekaa part. So therefore, you have then a possibility to increase the generation, and therefore that means that you will have electricity given definitely not 24 hours, but close to what we used to get before, like maybe 16, 17 hours.
Lebanon has huge quantities of untapped natural gas reserves, but experts say solving Lebanon's energy crisis for good will not happen until there is a stable government with a clear economic policy and revenue to invest in this vital sector. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still coming up on the show. The New Development Bank announces plans to expand its membership. And the Delta variant postpones plans to return to offices in the U.S.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
No one again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Well, let's now turn to more news on the virtual BRICS summit that opened on Thursday. The new development bank, which was backed by the BRICS nations, has announced plans to welcome 3 new members. It's also planning to move from its current location to a new office. Well, our reporter Chen Tong visited the site in Shanghai to find out more.
This is the new headquarters of the new development bank near Shanghai's World Expo Park. The bank is expected to move into this new building at the end of this month.
Nice to meet you. Same here. Welcome to our new home.
The building took 4 years to complete and boasts an overall floor area of 126,000 square meters, which can allow nearly 2,000 people to work here. The official move will take place on September 28th.
You just announced to welcome your 3 new member nations, and you are also going to move to this new office building at the end of this month. So it's kind of special at this point of time, right?
Absolutely. And Tong, as you asked this question, I realized that it is such a great coincidence. As we acquire new family members, we are moving to a new home as well. And most importantly, it's a place which is probably going to drive Pudong. It is going to make vibrant the whole place over the next 10-15 years.
At the beginning of September, the bank has announced to welcome the United Arab Emirates, Uruguay and Bangladesh as new members. These 3 nations are not included in BRICS, but have all shown an interest in promoting sustainable development. The bank says the addition will make their portfolio more diversified.
You know, it's a milestone event for NDB. We were just 5 members, although we accounted for 41% of the planet's population. Now we have 3 more, which means it gives us an opportunity to serve 180 million more people. And our development challenges are across the board similar, and we need to improve the infrastructure, we need to improve the sustainability of all our projects, of our livelihoods. So it's really important that the emerging markets develop rapidly and become more and more developed.
Since establishment in 2015, the bank has approved some 80 projects and $30 billion of loans. With new members on board, the bank's business is expected to further expand.
And sustainable projects are expected to become its major focus. Projects in areas like transport, water and sanitation, clean energy and digital infrastructure are within the scope of the bank. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, Apple supplier Foxconn's factory in central China's Zhengzhou says it is starting mass recruitment to meet production needs before the new iPhone series launch in mid-September. Now, CGTN's Wang Mingjie explores the plant and speaks with an expert about the recruitment push.
200,000 workers, historically high bonuses. This is Zhengzhou Foxconn's new recruitment effort before the iPhone 13 launch.
August has always been our peak period for recruitment. We are raising one-time bonuses for new candidates from around 9,800 yuan in July to over 10,000 to draw in more workers.
Wang says thanks to support from the local government, the company has reached 2/3 of its recruitment target so far.
The local government has provided job seekers with convenient services like free nucleic tests and shuttle buses to pick them up from more than 20 areas across the province.
With a mass recruitment continuing in China, Foxconn once planned to shift parts of its production to Vietnam and India to take advantage of their cheaper workforces.
Labor skill and management in Southeast Asian countries is on the low side compared with China. China has a huge and complete industrial ecosystem which can offer strong support for giant companies.
For Foxconn, this year's situation has been exacerbated as COVID-19 has caused raising labor and raw materials costs.
Situations in Southeast Asian nations like India are not ideal in terms of COVID prevention and control, which has slowed down their forward pace on mass production, while China has sought a balance between its virus fight and work resumption.
Professor Ma believes that the US crackdown on Huawei has partially benefited Apple's market share, but he says the global economic recovery from the pandemic is the main reason behind the increased market expectations and demand for new iPhones. 王梦洁 CGTN 郑州河南 Province.
And the Pingtan Island in East China's Fujian province is the closest place on the mainland to Taiwan. Now, the island has adopted many policies to deepen ties with Taiwan and foster integrated development across the strait. Here's CGTN's Zhao Yunfei with more.
For tech companies, their biggest asset is intellectual property. Chen Mengpang is the president of a semiconductor firm in the Taiwan Entrepreneurship Park in Pingtan. He says this expensive testing lab shows their commitment to future development in the experimental zone.
There was no integrated circuit industry in Pingtan. The main industry here was fishing. We started our company from scratch and eventually hired our employees, received the first order, and developed our first chip. Now the industry environment here is better.
As they've brought a new industry to the area, Chen says he's also optimistic about the market on the mainland. He says Pingtan's preferential policies provide them with an ideal business environment.
Here you can get what you need. As a Taiwan enterprise, as long as you can find your own way to development here, the government will help you.
Taiwan entrepreneurs here in Pingtan are leading the integrated circuit industry. Just in this complex behind me, there are 6 companies from Taiwan working in the area. They help guide the integration of the industry across the strait.
Stephen Xu is Chen Mengpang's cooperation partner. His company is right upstairs. Xu says the global chip competition is heating up, so his staff is benefiting from supplements in salary, housing, and tax from the government.
Our country has been suppressed by the United States in the area of integrated circuits. Therefore, in recent years, the government has strongly supported this industry and adopted many policies to help its development. And we are doing exactly that, so we benefit from these policies.
The business is growing, but the entrepreneurs say what they really hope is that more companies will join them to complete the industry loop. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Pingtan, Fujian Province.
And it has been almost 18 months since the coronavirus pandemic forced many people to shift to remotely working. With vaccinations rising and infection rates dropping in the US this spring, hopes were mounting that a return to the office would happen. But of course, the Delta variant has upended many of those plans. Here's Karina Hubert with more.
Labor Day was supposed to mark the return to the office for many U.S. workers, but the Delta variant has derailed some of those plans.
Delta variant is shifting the conversation away from we must get back to work to, oh my gosh, we have to think really critically about what work means now.
With rising infection rates in many parts of the United States, tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Apple have all told employees they aren't expected in the office until January 2022. Financial firms have been less flexible about remote working, with many of them, including Goldman Sachs and JP Chase, requiring workers return to the office this summer. But Wells Fargo, BlackRock, and some others have delayed the return to October. Cabral says workers have mixed reactions to the delays.
You've got the folks that were eager to get back that are really frustrated. And then you have the folks that are like, great, because I wasn't ready to go back into the office.
In cities like New York, the delayed return to normal is bad news for many of the businesses that cater to office workers.
There's been a big blow to restaurants. They were hanging on, waiting for September to come around, employees coming back to their offices, but now many of these office buildings are still at less than 20% occupancy, and these local restaurants and bars rely on those workers to keep their doors open. So if they're not coming back, it's going to pose significant challenges.
It also poses significant challenges to the economy of New York City, which needs the return of Manhattan's roughly 1.2 million office workers to get things back on track.
Officials in some cities and states have mandated the vaccine for government workers. They hope more in the private sector will do the same to lower the risk of infection and encourage more people to return to the office. Karina Huber, CGTN.
And shifting focus now, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Gold prices rising after 3 straight sessions of losses. That's as the dollar rally paused and investors' focus turned to a European Central Bank meeting, which is expected to signal a tapering of its emergency economic support. Meanwhile, oil prices remaining steady today as the Delta variant of the coronavirus continues to weigh on the demand outlook. That's offsetting a decline in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico output because of damage caused by Hurricane Ida. Well, let's take a short break now. Ugandans go cashless as one of the ways to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And South Africa's first black diving instructor turns the tide on apartheid's history.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kenyatta, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's head to Tunisia now, where less than a week before the start of the new school year, consumer defense organizations have denounced the skyrocketing prices of school supplies, books, and education in general. Now, basic education is free in Tunisia, but many parents are struggling to keep up with the indirect costs of schooling. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shauchi reporting.
Henda Rahal is a librarian from Tunis. She is also the co-owner of a school supplies shop in a popular neighborhood. She says that the skyrocketing price of all back-to-school items have affected her small business.
I'm selling back-to-school supplies and acknowledge that many items are expensive for ordinary parents who represent the majority of my clients. The inflation hit all sectors, including education. I'm trying to make deals during this period of the year, but books, notebooks, and all items cost more than before, while people don't have money. The rich, the middle class, and the poor complain. It's the same problem.
41-year-old Muhammad is a private sector employee who is struggling to make ends meet. He says that increased prices at the start of the new school year has a direct impact on people's purchasing power.
The prices of many school items have doubled since last year. I'm a poor man. I work to pay rent, the electricity and water bills. It's very difficult. My salary is too low to buy school bags for my 2 kids. I was lucky because this librarian agreed to split the costs over several months. She accepted to help me to send my kids to school.
The Minister of Education, Fathi Slauti, said that his department has printed 11.5 million books for all grade levels this summer. He added that a price hike was necessary this year because production costs are high, while the price of the subsidized items has not changed since 2008.
The global increase in the price of books is only 8.34%. It's not 25%, 30% or 40% as some people pretend. We were forced to make this slight price adjustment. The National Pedagogical Center is providing millions of subsidized books and notebooks. It regulates the market. The price of raw materials and paper and the real cost of school items is much higher than the selling price.
Tunisian President Kais Saied urged the Education Minister to ensure that the National Publishing Office can produce more subsidized books and notebooks and to supply enough school items so that all children can have their items before the start of the new year on September 15th. In partnership with the Education Ministry, hundreds of economic control agents from the Trade Department have launched a national campaign to control the prices of back-to-school items across Tunisia. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And in Uganda, traders are switching to cashless payments as a social distancing measure for COVID-19. Online platforms are now attracting thousands of consumers, especially in the country's capital, Kampala. Now, the move is meant to capture new opportunities in the digital marketplace, but also prevent the spread of the virus. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reporting.
A busy day at the Chikubo online shop. Orders keep coming and goods dispatched. Traders here say the demand for products has gone up. According to figures from Chikubo Online, the platform recorded an increase in the number of users from 7,000 to about 15,000 in a space of 2 years.
We have noticed that because of the pandemic, which in a way encourages social distancing, cashless payments to curb the spread of coronavirus, we saw many more people joining Chikubo Online, joining our platform to shop and to stock up.
Chikubo Online deals in a wide range of products such as sugar, beverages and detergents, among others. This store serves about 15,000 customers a month. The owners here say cashless payments are increasingly becoming the mode of transaction for consumers who choose to stay away to reduce exposure to the COVID-19 virus. Digital analysts say Uganda has a huge potential to accelerate e-commerce trading.
E-commerce is the way to go. People have to save time, but at the same time reduce costs of operations.
But the biggest downside is high internet costs.
When you look at things like the new tax that we have, the excise duty that is there, that is increasing the cost of internet, that service providers will definitely have to pass on to the final consumer.
Ugandan lawmakers recently passed a bill introducing a 12% tax on internet data. But as the country businesses shift to online markets, digital analysts want the government to review the tax laws. Hopefully, this could ease the cost of doing business online. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And to South Africa now, where a black free dive instructor is training black underprivileged youth on how to snorkel. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma with the story.
Zandile Ndlovu fell in love with the ocean while on holiday in Bali in 2016. She acquired a scuba diving certificate the following year. In 2020, she received an instructor's certificate in free diving with no equipment. Today, 33-year-old Ndlovu is South Africa's first black diving coach. She trains youth from Cape Town's Langa Township how to snorkel. This is part of her Black Mermaid Foundation initiative, which aims at introducing the ocean to the country's black youth.
In becoming a freediving instructor, I knew for the first time ever that this passion needed expansion. And the water space has not always been diverse, and I wanted to create a space where diverse representation in the ocean space is possible.
Established in 2020, Black Mermaid Foundation currently pays for the lessons. The initiative is, however, looking for funders to ensure its longevity. Before South Africa ended white minority rule in 1994, apartheid laws legalized racial segregation in all facets of life. Water sports were reserved for the white population. Today, these youth are acquiring new skills, thanks to Ndlovu.
Society teach us to swim and to know everything in the sea. And we saw octopus, fish, shark.
I learned that don't be scared, learn to be brave.
Actively taking these young kids, into the oceans, exposing them and giving them that experiential component helps them to, further down the line, actually understand the theoretical concepts that we teach them at university or at secondary school level. So it is a fantastic intervention that she has created and that she is promoting, and I wish we could have more of those.
A sacrifice Ndlovu made after giving up her consultancy business of 5 years and employment in the corporate services sector.
I want everyone to be able to experience this as early as possible and recognize that the ocean is not a place that we need to fear, but a place that we could come at and enjoy and revisit the stories that we grow up with that keep us away from these oceans as well. And my joy is the moment when one of the kids says, "Oh look, it's a fish," or "Oh look, it's a starfish," because it means that they have transcended the fear space to actually look beneath the surface.
An opportunity for Ndlovu to impart skills she hopes young people will live to cherish. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand inching up ahead of July manufacturing data, which is seen falling sharply from last month. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira hit a new record black market low of 540 naira to the dollar. The naira has been hitting new lows on the unofficial market since July. It has been hurt by low dollar supply as the central bank tries to draw business into the official exchange markets. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.